All right, good afternoon and welcome to John Box Watercolor. Today we're going to be painting a scene from France, but before we get started, if you wouldn't mind giving this video a thumbs up, and if you like what you see, consider subscribing. I'm going to put the reference photo over here on the right-hand side so you can take a look. I've kept my sketch pretty similar to that of our reference photo here. I have taken out some of those chairs and just opted to just kind of put these two tables and groupings of people. I've got these two people that we're going to try to have sitting down at a table with maybe a waiter or something. And then we've got two folks talking over here behind another table. I've also added this car here, or I guess I've changed the orientation of the car from our reference photo. But let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to wet the top of my paper here just to help keep some of that light and help our paint merge. But I am going to stop short of going all the way down because I want to have some areas that I will leave white. All right, so let's start with what we're going to do for our sky. I'm going to grab a little cobalt blue here. A little cobalt, a little cerulean blue. And just get a good blue color going. That looks pretty good. And since this is wet, I can really just let the dampness do the work for me. All right, and that's all we're going to do for our sky there. And I'm just going to let that sort of bleed down. The more you can let your paper and the medium do the work for you, the easier your job becomes. I'm going to warm this building up here. And I'll be painting this over in a second layer, so I'm not too concerned, but I'm just going to do a kind of a burnt sienna there, mixed in with that blue from earlier, until I get down to here. And we've got this really nice awning that I want to really accentuate. So I'm going to pull just some pure Mayan Orange out here and just let that kind of bleed down the paper there. Right like that. Perfect. All right. Grab some darker pigment here. And this is where I want to be careful. I want to leave the windshield of that car completely white. And I'm also going to be working around my figures as well. Now I'm going to just hold off for a couple of seconds here before I start immediately painting below this awning, because as I put that water there, what's going to happen, and I'm just drying this little spot here, what's going to happen is it's going to start to pull that pigment down the more water I add. And I just want it to soak into the paper just a little bit there so that I don't end up pulling all that orange pigment down from its intended area. So I'm going to mix up something dark here. I'm going to be painting over this, but the darker that I get on this first wash, the easier it will be for me to get dark on my second and third washes. All right. Again, being very careful to cut the shape of that car there. And notice I'm just going to get close to my figures here. I'm not going to work all the way into them. I'll grab a smaller brush where I've got a bit more control. Just something like that. Okay. Taper off the top of that. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and start. Let's build from the ground up here for a second. We'll let that dry. I'm going to keep the ground. Let's do warm. We've got that warm awning up there. Let's keep this warm. Neutralize that just a touch. As always, I want it to be darker at the bottom and then get lighter as we work our way up. So I'll add a bit more water. I'll just slowly work my way up here. I'm really just using almost pure water. Here, and I'll join these shapes. Be careful there. Yeah, something like that. I'm going to add a bit more dark coloration to the bottom there. And just something like that. I just want to have that variation in tone there. Now, let's grab this brush. Let's work in a little bit tighter to our figures here. Try to get some more kind of some cleaner lines and things. Don't want to have too much white. I've got to be able to break up the shapes a little bit. We'll do something like that. And I can go ahead and come up to the top of my car there and just leave that. I'll do one more pass down here at the bottom just to really make sure I've got some coloration down there. And I know it looks so dark, but you got to remember this is all wet and it's going to keep pulling itself down the page. When this dries, it will be hardly noticeable. Okay, so let's let this dry and we're going to come back and start our second wash. All right, and just like that, we are back and ready to keep moving along here. I'm going to start with my building first, and I'm going to mix up something a bit on the warmer side. I think I'm going to stick with that, that kind of theme we've got going. One thing to keep in mind is that as we work from our first wash to our second wash, third, so on, we want to be getting thicker and thicker with our paint pigments here. And I'm going to paint along like this. I'm going to try to leave some gaps of light for architectural kind of suggestions, if you will. And I want to... I'm just going to kind of let those bleed together. I want to also try to leave these windows that I've kind of loosely sketched. I want to possibly leave them just from that first wash, and we're going to come in and maybe add some details into them. We'll see how that works. I haven't quite decided. That's a fun thing about painting. You know, you kind of get to evolve as your painting does. You're sort of both a participant in the painting of your picture, but also an audience member, just to kind of watch and see what it needs. All right, I'll leave that there. I'll leave another kind of gap there. Could be a highlight of a rail or something within the building. Just keeping that warm. As I get further down the building, I want to get darker and darker so I can get some really nice contrast right here above this awning that we're going to be kind of cutting out here. And we're going to darken up a lot of stuff on this building, but I'm just getting this first kind of wash on there, and we're going to work with it while it's still wet as well. All right. I'll make sure I've got a nice clean top line. Okay, that looks very good. Now, let's start darkening things up here. Now, remember, you can always work with your watercolor when it is still wet. That's why it is so important to, before I move on to anything else here, I want to take note of what needs to be done on this building. And the first thing is that it needs to have, overall it needs to be darker, but also it needs some just darker areas of detail. And so what I'm doing is I've mixed up maybe a little bit cooler of a mixture, but certainly darker. And I'm just kind of working that along some of the edges there of those gaps of light I've left. And that's just to help suggest texture, details, all that good stuff. And you'll notice I just sort of brush it along and then leave it alone. You know, the more that we can let watercolor do its own thing, the better. We'll put some darker pigment at the tops of these windows. There we go. That looks nice. And let's grab a smaller brush. And I don't know exactly what I want to do to these windows, but they need something done to them. Let's start off with just drawing a center line down it, just to separate the panes of glass or just the sides of the window. I already think that definitely looks nicer. I'm gonna grab some even darker paint here to run along. And I'm just dabbing my brush, right? It's already wet, and so sometimes if you try to keep your brush on the paper and sort of smear through it, it kind of rubs the paint around instead of getting it to soak into what you're trying to do. All right, I'm squinting, trying to look at my tones. I think it looks okay. I think those windows are a little bit too light for a building that is primarily in shadow here, so I haven't decided how I want to do this. I think what I may do, I'm going to take some of this Chinese white. It's always hard for you guys to see that pale. It's in the very top right of my palette here. I'm going to just pick up some pure pigment and maybe throw that through there. Kind of gives it this sort of icy look. And I will leave some of that behind there. And you know what, maybe I'll just do it on the top for now. And we'll see how we like it. We'll just leave it like that. Kind of come back to it. We'll play with it a little bit, but I want to let it dry a little bit first. I'm going to add just some more of that darker paint to the tops here, because as you can see, it's faded off. There we go. Well, it's almost blue. I think some of that ultramarine has bled over, but that's okay. Just gives us more variation. All right, last thing I'm going to do, just give it a spray, keep it wet. And you'll notice this paint's really running. We're going to leave that. We love that. It's what creates interest in our work. All right, let's start working below the awning. Now, it is imperative that this is as dark as possible. It is what's going to create contrast and help us negatively paint around our figures. It's what's going to really make that awning pop. So I'm trying to pull just pure pigment. And just for your reference, this is neutral tint. This is a neutral gray, and this is a warm gray here. These are all Daniel Smith, Joseph Z colors. I'm going to spray a little bit up here. Try to get a little bit more water. Make them easier to pick up. And I'm going to get close to the figures, but again, not all the way up close to them. I'm going to have a smaller brush for that. All right. That's looking good. I'm going to put a little bit of paint out here, but I'm going to cool it off because I want this area here to be pushed back a little bit. And so when you cool off your paint, typically it helps push it back some. I'm going to grab some pure water there. Got to be careful to just cut the edge of that awning there. And maybe I'll draw a suggestion of another building over here or something. Do something there. And then I'm working on accentuating that light colored windshield there of our car. I'm gonna grab some dark paint here. Just cut on the edge of that awning and then take some water to suggest some buildings and things back there. But again, I want to help give structure to the edge of that awning. All right, we're moving along pretty good here. Let's grab my smaller brush and let's work on getting right up next to these figures. Always nice to have a smaller brush nearby. Could be a little bit tedious. It's not my most favorite thing to do. I really like to use big brushes because they tend to work quickly, and I'm an impatient painter. But sometimes you've got to slow down and get that detail. And this is still not nearly as dark as I'd like it to be, but for now, I think it's just fine. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is as I'm working down this, I'm going to switch to a cooler color. I'm going to grab some blues, go back into our neutral. We'll grab a little bit of warm just to help neutralize that. But what I want to do is kind of start tinting some shadows here. And again, this needs to be fairly dark. I really want it to contrast with the ground, but I want to start breaking from the underneath of that awning just to get things going. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start about where I think the shadows would be for these folks. I'm going to start just putting them in there. We're going to have a kind of a right, or excuse me, a left to right sun. And just put those in there like that. Okay, and I'll draw, I'm just moving my brush rapidly underneath here where these tables and chairs are going to be, just to create some more angles of chair legs and all that good stuff. You don't want to overdo it. You want to make sure you're still leaving plenty of light underneath there. When I say light, I mean breaks between your shadows. You don't want to end up with, you know, just one complete mess there, but I think that looks okay. I may have overdone it slightly, but that's okay. You live and you learn. We'll see. I'm going to grab some more of this dark pigment here and go right underneath this umbrella, this awning. There we go. Okay, it's starting to come along. Let's peek back up here at our building. I want to even darken some of this up a little bit more. Something like that. And I think I'm going to do the same thing I did with the upper windows on the lower windows here. And that's by adding some of that white paint in there. Just to break them up. Okay, that's looking nice. I think we're ready. I would like to start on our car here. I'm going to make it yellow. We're going to do a taxi. And I'm pulling straight yellow ochre here. This has got to be very, very thick paint. This is what's going to allow us to have this sort of pop out of the page. Now, after that first stroke there, I'm going straight for my darks. And I'm going to just let them bleed together. That's how we're going to get that transition of light to dark on our car, right? It's brighter on top, and as we move down, it's going to get darker. I'm starting on my tires there. Okay. I'm going to come over here, and I should have, I wish I'd saved some of that kind of blue shadow color we were working with, but that's okay. We'll mix something close enough. Make sure it's good and dark. And then I'll go ahead and connect from underneath there and just pull that over. Maybe throw another shadow in there. Just thicken that up a little bit. Okay, looks nice. You always want to take and add a dark line on your cars here. This can represent either a bumper if the car is facing forward, or kind of that shadow right under the lip of the trunk on a car as well if the rear is facing you. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow just on top of this to help it just transition a little bit better. Maybe push some of that up. I'm just using my brush to kind of push the paint how I want it. Let's do some mirrors. I have a mirror there. I have a mirror there as well. Okay, that looks all right. And now what I may do is I don't want that to be too white, right? I may just take and just let that bleed off the side there a little bit. What I'd really like to do is dip some water in there and let it bleed down into the taxi. Kind of get some sort of a running there of our paint. Again, that's the fun thing about watercolor. You don't want everything to be perfect. You got to let it run. You got to have some spontaneity in there. All right, adding some more darks in there under the umbrella. Adding some darks there. Excellent. You know what? I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna take some water and just dip it in there, right like that. I need to give it somewhere to go though. We're gonna cut across that figure. Okay. Let me grab my palette knife. Maybe we'll, it might still be too wet in there. I think it is. I wanted to kind of scratch out some places where some other people could be, but we'll see how that works. Okay. Now, what do we want to do next? I've got a couple of decisions here. Obviously, I need to start on my figures. We've left them just completely white at the moment, and that's going to help us really make them stand out. We're going to be using a lot of pure paint on them, probably just straight out of the tube. All right, before we do that, I'm just glancing back at my building again. Remember, the only time you can fix your watercolor when you're doing this kind of wet on wet is when the building or whatever you're painting is wet. So you don't want to let it dry on you. I'm going to reach in here, get some more of that Mayan Orange, and just throw it on the bumper there. We'll do a car that's from the rear. And I kind of want to just dab a little water on there and just let it run down. Again, that's the most fun part of watercolor. Let it do its thing. I promise you, it will not let you down. Watercolor itself is a better artist than any painter could be trying to control it. All right, so we got our car there. Let's start on our people. Let's get in here and do it. I'm grabbing my pure tubes of paint here. Again, all my paint is Daniel Smith. Highly recommend it. It's very pigmented. It's well worth it. All right. I just keep looking at my building. I need to not stress with it so much, but always looking for ways to, I don't know. We'll leave it alone. Okay. I'm gonna grab some lavender. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull it straight from the tube here. I'm gonna grab just a little water on the end of my brush and just dab it right there. And then I'm gonna go straight in to this figure here. Right like that. And what's nice is that since the paper's still just a little bit wet, it's going to kind of bleed out into its surroundings. And that's what watercolor, again, is all about. I'm going to grab some pure, that's some warm gray down there. And I'm going to, ooh, it's a little wet there, but that's okay. I'll do something like that. Come in here, let's grab some burnt sienna. We'll do something right like that. Perfect. I actually grab a little bit more of that from the tube. I want to pull that down. The pants kind of bled up a little bit. All right, that looks good. What color do we want to do for this individual? Let's do, tell you what, we're going to skip them for a second. We're going to move over. We're going to do this individual here. I think I can, without getting the tube out, I'm just going to pull straight from there. And again, it's okay that that's starting to bleed over a little bit. I want to keep them brighter, so I don't necessarily want it to bleed in that much. But that's something I can fix in a little bit. I may just let it do its thing. I can come back, paint over it, no big deal. Let's do for this individual, let's do a jacket. Let's go really dark, right? We've got kind of two bright figures here. Let's go for the black. I shouldn't say black, it's this is my warm gray. Let's go for that just really, really stark contrast. I got a little bit of brown on my brush there. That's okay. Let's add that face there. Perfect. I need to work that jacket off a little bit. I made his shoulders massive. All right, that looks pretty good. And let's give him, could be a her, but let's do a tie. Yeah, something like that. Excellent. Now we got to do these figures over here. Let's keep with the blues, I guess. I'll mix some Cerulean. You know what? We're going to go straight out of the tube again. I'm looking to have that really strong impact. Let's pull the blues out. Let's grab some Cerulean. All right, just going to pull that right out of the tube there. And I'll probably end up going over the top of these here a second time in a few places. Again, always using that burnt sienna for my figures' faces. I'll put hands there. Let's grab some of that dark paint. Give them some hair. Don't always do hair, but I'll do that. I'm going to do some hair here because that head bled up too high. And I need to neutralize my colors a little bit. I'm getting a little too wild. What do I want to do here? Just a warm-ish color, maybe? Something like that. Grab some water. And we'll just let everything kind of bleed together. Now, I do need to try to convey a table here, which unfortunately, I think I may have dropped the ball on a little bit, but we're going to see what we can do, right? Watercolor is all about being abstract, so let's get abstract here. I'm going to mix up something dark, something warm. I need to refill those pails up there. All right. Now, the key with being abstract is always going to be move quickly, move confidently. Before I do it, though, I'm going to pull just a little bit of that water away there. And then we're going to go for it. There'll be a tabletop, right? Some chairs and things. I'll do something like that. Okay, we'll do one here as well. I got to make sure and have some vertical lines. Oops, that one's got all that burnt sienna on it. Let's cool that off. All right. When you think table, I just think of one vertical or one horizontal line with a bunch of vertical lines for legs, chair legs, people legs, something like that. Okay, I think that looks nice. The only thing is, those shadows are not dark enough. I'm a little disappointed in that, so we're gonna try to cleanly make them a bit darker and throw some more of them out there. It's difficult though. Something like that. I think that looks okay. We'll darken it a little bit there. Oh, and you know what? I wanted to throw a person here just over on the right-hand side of this car. Let's do another Chinese white here. I'm pulling out Chinese white, going straight in the tube. Let's just throw a figure right there. I'll grab my dark paint. Something like that. There's our head. Okay. All right. Overall, this is coming together. This is coming together. I think we're gonna let this dry, and we are going to come back and add in some dry brushing and some details here. So stay tuned. All right, we're back, ready to finish this guy up. So first thing I want to do, Oh, one thing I did do off camera here, as this was drying, I took my palette knife and just scratched in a few vertical lines here on this awning, just to, again, break up kind of that dark shape. And I did scratch a little license plate there. I'm going to take this brush. This is kind of my dry brush. And we're going to do a little bit of dry brush work here on this building, just to help really give it some finer details. And again, I'm keeping it simple. You don't want to overdo it. Got a couple of lines for architecture, and then maybe, let's see, do I want to do one down the middle? Yeah. Just right like that. Okay, I think that looks nice. I'm going to take that same dark color here and make sure my figure there is nice and dark. And I think I want to lighten a few things up here. Let's do, I'm going to grab that Chinese white again. Just throw a little bit there. That looks better. That does too. What I really wanted to do with this figure here was almost create like a vest for them. Let's see. We'll try it. I want to give that darker body with the lighter. Yeah, all right, that looks okay. Not bad. And I'm just looking if I want to throw some more lavender on this figure here. Sometimes it's better to wait until your painting's dry like this. It really helps those colors stand out. Okay, I think that's good. Throw a little hand or something there. Oops. Maybe throw one here as well. Just a few things. Okay. All right, now for the fun part. We're going to grab our white titanium gouache. This is what we're going to use to create some highlights. This is always the best part here, right? This is what's going to help bring those figures out of the darkness. Oh, it just looks great. It's by far the most fun. And you can also save some, so if somebody's got too big of a head, what you can do is just adjust where you put your gouache, since it covers everything, and you can kind of reshape the outlines of some of your figures. It can be very, very helpful. Throw something for my windows there. I'm gonna throw something on the top, make it look a little bit more like a taxi. And then we definitely got to have some stuff through here, right? I mean, this is supposed to be tables and chairs and things. I'll throw in like the hoop of a chair. Yeah, just trying to break things up. We'll throw a couple of highlighted vertical lines. Throw another hoop there. And since I've got so much highlights going on in there, and I may have overdone that, I've got to add them in other places or else it's just going to look extremely unnatural. I'm just going to add, maybe there's somebody coming out of the darkness there. I'll do that. And I think I overdid it in here, unfortunately. What I like to use, sometimes I can use this to scratch out little areas of gouache, help thin them out. You want to try to break up, so I'll tell you, this will be something I talk about once we go over things I like, things I don't like. I did something that you want to try to avoid. I'm going to add a little highlight on that license plate. You want to try to avoid having the entire figure isolated in gouache, and these two over here are fine. This figure here almost got surrounded in it. You don't want to give that halo effect. You really want to pick top of the head, one shoulder, do a large amount, and then just touch the other shoulder maybe. I didn't quite do that, but that's okay. That is okay. I still think it's not going to ruin the painting. Definitely could be better. I'm going to get some dark paint up here. I'm going to give them a tie. It's a restaurant or something. Okay. I think that looks nice. I'm going to pick up some of that gray though and do like, I don't know, maybe try to do a figure in the back there. It might be too dark. But just to kind of have somebody breaking out of the shadows there. I don't know. Might be too much. I'll try to add that gouache and see if they'll pop out. So this is what you should do. You should do the top of the head. You pick one shoulder to do a lot on, and then you just touch the other one. That's typically the better way to do it. Sometimes I'd actually recommend not doing both shoulders. But for this figure, they're so far back there, I think they needed it. Okay. Final touches. Let's definitely turn up the intensity on these taillights here. Definitely want to turn those up. And let's see, is there anything else? I kind of wanted to add some sort of brief sort of perspective lines on that umbrella there. I don't want it to be perfect, right? Don't want it to be perfect. Pull that through there. Yeah, something like that. All right, where's my paper towel? Dry that off. Okay, let's sign it and let's talk about what we could have done better, what we did well, and what we'll be thinking about for next time around. I need to get a new little brush. I've punished this one a bit too much, and it's getting hard to sign my works. It just kind of looks like a blob, which is fine. I've got the red on here. Do I want to do anything? Let's add one vertical line there. Don't know what it is. Okay, all finished. So overall, I like the painting. I think our awning looks excellent. I like the taxi here and the people. It's got a very, very lively feel to it, I would say. Things I don't like. I think I overdid it a bit on the gouache over there. And I think it was compounded by the fact that I had some white already in those areas just from the paper that I hadn't quite gone over. And so it looks like a lot of gouache. It is. But there's also some areas that are just paper, and it kind of just, you can't tell the difference. It just turned into a lot of highlights going on in there. I think that was a bit overdone. I think our taxi looks nice. I like our figures. I think it looks pretty darn good. The only other thing I would have liked to improve on is I did these shadows early. I should have waited because I would have liked to essentially take all these shadows and move them down maybe a centimeter or so, just because I really wanted to catch a very bright gleam of light behind these figures, isolating sort of the ground outside of this awning's shadow and I guess the shadow part. I just want to have more of a light break back here and maybe bring the shadows down because I've got a lot of empty space up here. But again, something to think about for next time. So if you stuck with me to the end, I really appreciate it, and I hope you learned something. If you haven't already, consider subscribing, and all of these works are going to be for sale in my store. So thanks again, and remember to keep on painting.